All right, so let's get ready to start as soon as you give me the high sign. All right. Let's call to order this meeting of the Montara Water and Sanitary District Board of Directors, August 21st, 2014. Time is 7:35. Could we have a roll call, please?
Director Harvey?
Here.
Director Boyd?
Here.
Director Wilson?
Here.
Director Huber?
Here. All right, I'll note that Director Slater-Carter is not able to join us tonight. Let me, for our President's statement, mention a couple of things. One, our district, unlike so many other parts of California, is doing rather well with water, in no small part because our community has been, for years, very responsive and responsible with water. And we want to express our appreciation for the conservation that everyone is doing. And for the time being, let's keep doing it. Our community is doing us all proud, and that's putting us in pretty good stead. Let me also mention that this isn't the big rollout for it, but our website has undergone a significant change, and you might want to check it out at MWSD.montara.org. Okay, with that, do we have any oral comments for items other than those on the agenda? All right. We have no public hearing. Consent agenda. Does any board member wish to pull an item for consideration? Hearing none, can I have a motion, please?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second the motion.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you. Motion carries 4-0. Old business, item 1, review and possible action concerning water rate study.
So after the adoption of a reserve policy in 2013, the board authorized Bartle Wells, our financial consultants, to prepare a water rate study that essentially considers the new reserve policies and makes recommendations to how to increase the district's water reserves over time. Bartle Wells presented a draft study that was pretty much a year ago in August 2013. That was reviewed by the rate committee and discussed then at the June 18, 2013 meeting. However, the budget was adopted before the completion of the rate study. We now, within a year, have a significantly changed financial situation. We have a number of things have changed. For example, we now know that the centralized airport treatment plant will not be built. That is potential savings in the $1 million range. We have a better forecast to increase water connections, for example. I don't want to take too much of Alex Handler's presentation, but there are some major drivers that essentially have changed in the past year, and that we also other drivers, actually we will know answers for some questions that are still open in the coming months. The thought process is that we are at the end of our Prop 218 limit, so the current rates are at the top level for the Prop 218, what is allowed under Prop 218. If the district does not change its operation structure or increases rates, then we foresee a financial deficit, and that is why the board has now repeatedly stated, and we brought this to the board as well, that the rate study should be reviewed again, and we should plug in the new information that we have. So we have Alex Handler with Bartle Wells here for a discussion about the initiation of the process. And this is what the board has asked us to do, is essentially to, before any steps are taken, engage in a discussion with the board so that we get clear direction on the scope of the rate study. So with that, I might give hand this over to
Here's some
Alex.
A few handouts. There's a few extras here too. It's not that exciting, but anyway, thank you. Yeah, today, I mean, I'm just going to walk through this pretty quickly so I don't waste too much of your time. But really, what we wanted to do is kind of set the stage for upcoming rate study, present some, little history, little background of what happened. I know you have a couple new board members since you've kind of gone through this process in the past, so just mention a little bit about your rate structure and financial plans and what we're going to be doing, and really get just preliminary input. This is the very start of the process. We really haven't done anything yet in terms of updating the rate study. And also talk just real quickly about what the process is, which you may or may not be familiar with. The last full rate study was done back in 2010. So, over 4 years ago. At the time, the district adopted 2 years of rates. They adopted maximum rates that were going to go through 2011-12 through the Prop 218 process. However, the district only implemented some of those rate increases. Going back a year or so, the district had identified some expensive capital projects and had experienced a decline in water sales that was taking a little toll on revenues. So an updated rate study was initiated. While we were doing the rate study, it was during the budget process. It was understood all of a sudden, hey, wait a minute, there's still more room to go under the existing Prop 218. So before we even went through the whole rate study process, we just had some preliminary results. The board opted just to keep going with the existing Prop 218 and adopt kind of a small annual rate increase to keep rates moving in the right direction, which is always a good thing to do. As Clemens just mentioned, the rate study was deferred. You've had a lot of changes. And what we've seen is you've taken that 2 years of rates and spread it over 4 years, which is great. But you are always, as all water agencies, facing ongoing financial challenges. Clemens already highlighted some of the changes. There's going to be some changes in capital improvement plan costs and timing. Sounds like they're for the better without the need for the airport treatment plant. I know there's still some ongoing studies as to what the actual capital costs will be for the water tank. And that's one thing I wanted to mention we could look at during the study is we could work with the district and district engineer to identify a few key capital improvement alternatives for evaluating the impacts of if the board wants to go that direction. With the change in the capital needs also comes a change in future debt service. So that's something that's going to benefit the district. You're not going to have debt service hitting you next year, which will allow for hopefully a more gradual, slower ramp up of future rates. Some things have been working for you, some against you. One that hasn't been working in your favor is growth, which has been slower than anticipated. On the other side of the coin, you've got Pillar Ridge coming online. You've got potential impacts of the Big Wave project if and when that comes through. So there's a lot of different moving parts to this, so we thought it was a good time to update everything with the latest and greatest information and kind of see where your finances need to go in upcoming years. And that's, when I think of a rate study, I really think of two components of the rate study. The first is the big picture financial plan, the financial projections. That's coming up with 5-year projections. We could do 10-year projections, whatever you'd like to see. Really try to get a big picture sense of what are all the financing needs that the district has with operating costs, capital costs, future debt service, evaluating funding options for capital improvement projects. In the past, the district has been nice to receive some low-rate funding commitments from the State Revolving Fund loan program. So that's always one option, but you do have other options, including potential inter-fund loan from the sewer enterprise if needed, or even trying to do as much pay-as-you-go financing as you can if you can phase stuff in over time. Another key element is making sure that over time you are building and accruing adequate fund reserves. Clemens mentioned there was a policy that was adopted by the board in recent years. Your fund reserves aren't currently at that level, but that's something that we could aim the district's rates to achieve over a number of years so we can get board input. Is that something you want to try to achieve in 3 years, 5 years, 8 years? There's no right answer. There's risks associated with everything as well. But that's the big picture. Look at all the finances. Once we come up with kind of a baseline financial model, it's very easy for us to start looking at different scenarios and what-if scenarios that the board or staff may want us to look at. And always our goal is to try to phase in rate increases gradually over time to avoid the rate spikes that are typically not popular with your customers. And this slide here, I just wanted to highlight some of the drivers of the rate increases. Obviously, a big one is the future capital needs, not only the cost, but also the timing of those needs and how you finance those projects. You know, all this we can look at and see how it impacts the need for future rates, you know, the timing for achieving the fund reserve policy targets. A big thing that's impacted a lot of agencies have been changes in water sales. Conservation is great for protecting your water supply. At the same time, it reduces your revenues, which puts upward pressure on rates. But what I always tell agencies is if you have to raise rates because water sales have gone down, it doesn't mean people's bills are going up. It means the rates have to be a little higher to cover your costs. Yet people are buying fewer units of water, so it's kind of a wash at the end of the day and cheaper than the alternative.
So to speak.
Yeah. There's always ongoing cost inflation for water wastewater agencies. It's, you know, typically 3, 4, 5% per year, higher than CPI that impacts typical consumers out there. So if you think of just doing a 3% rate increase, it's really just spinning your wheels in real dollar terms just to stay even. That's kind of a good baseline to start with. It didn't sound like you had any big new regulatory requirements that are hitting you, but they've certainly hit a lot of other agencies out there. And a couple of other key drivers are, you know, what's happening with future growth and how is that going to bear in their finances, and also the degree to which the district wants to, you know, achieve and maintain balanced budgets in future years. So once you get the big picture identified, then we take a look at the actual rate structure itself, how you recover those revenues. Currently, the district has two types of charges. There's fixed service charges that are based on meter size. Everyone pays that every month, regardless of whether they use a drop of water or not, and that helps fund some of the district's fixed operating costs. And then you pay quantity charges according to a 4 inclining tier rate structure based on bi-monthly metered water use. You do have about 125 accounts that also pay private fire service charges, so those could be updated in the process as well. I just wanted to mention that during the last rate study in 2010, I know there was a lot of effort looking at the rate structure, and what the district did at that time, just to give you a little history, is they reduced the fixed service charges that everyone had to pay from $35. Now they're currently about 25 and change. And at the same time, moving from 2 tiers to 4 tiers and building in some more conservation incentive, particularly for higher levels of water use. And when we looked at your water use data from the prior couple of years last year, it looked like, you know, water use had come down, but not evenly among all the tiers. It looked like water use came down more significantly in the higher tiers, which is good. People that typically is outdoor water use. However, that does take a little more hit out of your revenues because that's higher rates at the higher tiers. The last time the rates were set, the fixed charges were set to recover roughly 30% of rate revenues, and quantity charges 70%. There's no magic to that. There's no right answer. But that 30-70 is a number that has been put out there by the California Urban Water Conservation Council as kind of a good target to achieve. This is a slide showing your current water rates. At the top, it shows the fixed service charges. Almost all your customers are at the very highest charge. They're the 5/8 by 3/4 inch meter. So most folks pay a little over $25.59 per month. The quantity charges are in 4 tiers. As I recall, it's about a little over 40% of the water use is in Tier 1, something like 30% in Tier 2, and then downwards with less and less in Tier 3 and Tier 4. Your rates range from $7.43 to $17.35 in the highest tier. That's per unit. A unit is 100 cubic feet, which is 748 gallons. So over on the right-hand side, I just translated, what does that mean as a rate per 100 gallons? So it's 99 cents per 100 gallons to $2.32 per 100 gallons. No, they're not cheap rates, but to put it in perspective, you're still getting quite a lot of water per dollar compared to what you can buy in the store. We didn't know what direction the district wanted to take regarding the water rate structure. What you have now is fine. We could do some analysis on the usage and see if it's still along the lines of what the district intended, the use of the different tiers. But we could look at different rate structure alternatives or modifications as directed by the board and come up with rate alternatives to the degree you want us to look at that. Always making sure that they're going to fund the revenue requirements identified in the financial plan and be fair to folks and comply with the legal requirements of Prop 218. And that's the last thing I just wanted to cover. I don't know if everyone's familiar with Prop 218. It's an California constitutional amendment approved by the voters in 1996 that was called the Right to Vote on Taxes Act. Water, sewer, and garbage rates do not require a public vote to increase those charges, provided they adhere to the principles set out in Prop 218 and provided you adopt them by the appropriate procedural requirements. The substantive requirements of Prop 218 are that the rates cannot exceed the cost of service, which the courts have generally given a little deference to agencies to determine what is the cost of service, and certainly building and maintaining adequate fund reserves is a reasonable cost of service, as well as planning for the future capital projects, etc. You can only use revenues for the purpose for which they're collected. That won't be a problem for you, but there were a number of cities using their water and wastewater rates as a cash cow for their general funds, which was hoped to eliminate that. And the rates have to be reasonably proportional to the different parcels that are served. On the procedural side, you can't just go out and raise the rates. You have to follow the process, which I think is pretty straightforward. You send a notice out to all your ratepayers, property owners, notifying them of the rate increase and the public hearing. You have to wait 45 days, then you can hold a public hearing at which the rate increases are subject to majority protest, meaning if more than 50% of all affected parcels submit written protests, then you cannot implement the rate increase. But that is an extreme rarity, although it has happened a few agencies where someone's going door to door, where the agency is tripling the rate overnight without going through a public process. I'm thinking Crystal Springs County Sanitation District in San Mateo County. There have been some new legal interpretations of Prop 218 by the courts. I think that'll also bear in the study, making sure you're meeting the latest and greatest rulings by the courts, which keep upping what agencies need to do to demonstrate that the rates are fair. So the next steps, again, this is just setting the stage, hearing from the outset if there's any preliminary issues, a direction that the board would like to go in. You're going to have more opportunities. I think we'll work with Clemens to come up with a process for getting a little more input as the rates are being developed, whether it's through subcommittee or through the full board, and also at some level from the public as the study progresses. The goal was to try to get through the study in the current calendar year, roughly, and get the Prop 218 process going early in 2015 so that new rates would be effective starting 2015-16, July 1. It's typically when the district has raised rates. That kind of concludes the information we wanted to cover. We just wanted to open it up for questions or any discussion at this stage.
So, comment from a member of the public?
I just have a question.
So I'll note that this is Bill Kehoe. If you could step up to the mic.
As you were going through the slides, I was following along in the packet, and most of the slides agree, but my eye was drawn to the rate projections on this page, and I didn't see that in your slide. But you mentioned that you could raise rates up to 9% under the current 218 without having to do another 218.
You're bringing up a good question. That was from over a year ago. Those were kind of some draft projections.
Okay.
So this is, the district's all done with its Prop 218.
Okay.
They did must have been like a 4% last year and another small, inflationary increase this year.
And
So
this is an outdated draft.
Okay.
It's from 2013.
Okay.
yeah, so don't, yeah, that's old and the information's a little outdated. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, and that's great. And I noticed it was for September 1st, 2013. So that's that 9%, which wasn't really 9%, it was only a part of that. But then the real question for 2014, 15, 16, and 17, you show 8, 8, 8, and 8. Is that just a place filler? Is that a recommended amount?
Good question. That was kind of preliminary projection based on all the capital needs that the district thought it needed to do last year. The district's been working to try to contain costs and revisit some of those projects and eliminate them to the extent it can. So the hope is things have changed for the better, and that those, the next time we come back with projections, it'll be lower than that, but we can't guarantee anything at this stage till we get the best information. That was a rough projection.
Okay, so
Draft
rough projection, more studies need to be done before an actual figure is put in there.
Well, simply put, this is what came before us last year. And
Okay.
we sent it back, and now we're taking another look, and we don't expect to see numbers quite like this on the next go-round. And part of what helps justify that,
Yeah.
well, certainly, we rarely have rate increases like this.
Yeah.
Our
Well-
neighbors, I will point out, our neighbors to both sides are experiencing rate increases of this and more. So for us to hold the line, which we have done for quite some time now, I think that's our interest to try to do that. But that said, there are costs that go up. But I think what you're getting at is, if I hear you, you want us to hold the line on that best we can.
Well, I'm just, and I understand when you look at trends for special districts that, revenues are dropping and the cost of operations are going up. And that's every special district everywhere in the Western world.
Every household.
Yeah. And the only thing that, strikes fear into me and probably a lot of other residents on the coast side who live off of fixed incomes is that sure beats our COLA on our Social Security by a long shot. And we have roughly 30% of the people on the coast side are retired. Senior citizens is the number that came out in the 2010 census. So I know you guys do a great job of, squeezing every penny out and doing the minimum amount of raises to make the system whole, which we're all grateful for. We have good water, we have good service. But that's just, when I saw it was a shock, and I wanted to make sure I kind of understood that this is kind of needs to be refined. But when you look at all the things that the water company needs to be doing, it's not out of the ballpark. It just might be able to be pulled back a little through your expert stewardship, should I put it that way?
Well, what Clemens led off with, this is very important. So one of our next items, in fact, our very next item, well, I'll save it. I'll just foreshadow it. The next item will be interesting, especially in light of Clemens' introduction to this topic in your comments. Board members.
In general terms, it seems like to me that the foundation has already been set, so all you have to do is just basically adjust a number of categories, a number of numbers, so we're not starting from scratch for a new study, correct?
No, I think we have a pretty good model that, we'll have to work through the process and, get what are the right numbers to put in there, I think is the more challenging part. But we have a pretty good model that we can use to update, unless you want to start looking at, a number of different rate structure alternatives and things like that. But yeah, we do have some good financial model from last time that we could use as much as possible.
Okay, may I say something, Bill?
Sure.
If I may, it sounds to me the two challenges are the following. One is trying to determine what the infrastructure needs going forward and working really close to make sure those are covered, because in the past, as you know, part of the water bill is in our homeowners. And we're paying bonds on projects that actually come through our homeowners that we pay at the end of the year. So that's one issue. And the other issue seems to me is we have the issue of the reserve account. And I think, I know Clement, in our monthly meeting we had this morning, the question is going to be is how much of a reserve account should we have, and how viable is accessing the sewer side for loans in relation to how much of that reserve account we need to maintain. And I would love to see a discussion in your summary of addressing the pros and cons of, you know, how much of a reserve account we should have on the water side, knowing that we could tap in on a short-term basis on the sewer side. So, and I think that might have some mediation of the issue of the rates, because they do tie into each other ultimately.
They do, and you're bringing up a good point. I mean, I think some of it's going to come down to board policy decisions, because you do have cash on the sewer side. If you had an emergency on your water side, you do have available funds that could be tapped on an interim basis to, you know, fix a water main or something like that. But, you know, I think a lot of the stuff's going to be at the board's policy direction, where they would like to see.
You know, what I would like to see, I'd kind of like to see what I'd like to kind of see what freestanding water districts do with their reserve account compared to what we may have to do. And then I'd love to see if there's any joint districts and those that have tapping inability to other accounts, and how they do business, and what's the norm for that, so that we have something to compare it with. And then the other thing I would assume we're going to do, and I'm sure that's going to come out in this discussion, is a review of the maintenance items and make sure we don't underfund or overfund that account. So I know we've done that before, but we might want to try to do a good job trying to quantify that to the best of our ability.
So, what I heard you say, let me try to see if I understood this correctly, is that you might want us to take a look at our current existing reserve policy, and if it is adequate for our purposes, or if it needs to be revised. And you also want us to take a close look at the capital improvement program going forward at our actual needs.
You're much better articulating than I am, but yes.
Okay. Well, I just want
Why you didn't do so bad? Can we turn that off? Do we need that?
Yeah, would be nice. Thank you. That's all. That's the question.
Okay. I think I got my comments in with responding to Bill, so I don't have any further questions. Comments or anyone else?
But basically, going forward, if we just simply take what you've done in the previous study and use that as a sort of guideline, and sort of look at each category, so forth, we can use that as a basis for going forward, right? For just... Okay.
So I think if there are no further comments, then maybe I'm gonna summarize on what staff is planning to do. And essentially, that is work with the board on resolving some open questions. Let's say, for example, we will receive bids for the Alta Vista tank. That's going to be one of these open-ended questions,
Yeah.
and that's going to happen in early September. Again, the goal is to have something prepared by the end of this calendar year, early next calendar year, so that we can go out in a timely fashion for Prop 218 process. So we have some time to work through some of the major questions. We're also going through a strategic planning process currently that's going to help us answer additional questions that we might have. And with that new information that we gain within the next 1 or 2 months, that's the time period essentially where we plan to collect all the data that Bartle Wells needs and plug in the new drivers, the new dials, and as soon as we're comfortable, we will bring a draft similar to the draft that was prepared last year to the board, and we'll ask for further input.
Okay. All right, well, thank you. And,
Okay.
No, I have one final question.
this is kind of, it's an old Steve Jobs trick, but it's usually not a question. It's
No, this is a question. Yeah, and but it goes along the Steve Line Jobs of how much is this going to cost? I mean, what kind of parameters for, if we get very elaborate with this, let's say doing this sort of study of how we establish rates or something like this, as opposed to just taking this outline and going through each line item and so forth.
Yeah, you're bringing up a good point. I mean, typically, I think like a water rate study, I think in the past it's been like in the $30,000 range. Certainly, we've done some for 10. We've done some for much more when there's a huge process. I think the process is going to drive it. I don't foresee this being a huge effort considering what we've done in the past. I think already we're going to build off that. Changing some numbers, yes, but there'll be there's always some unanticipated things and working through progressions. But and my sense is that, again, in deference to the board's desires and what they want to do with the rates, last time you went through kind of a review of the rate structure, and what you have certainly looks like a logical, sound rate structure. There's no compelling need to change it unless you wanted to or address a few issues around the edges here and there. So I don't foresee there being a huge effort regarding rate structure. With some agencies there is. They want to, what if we did this? What if we did tiers? What if we did water budgets? What if we did uniform rate? But we can kind of talk through some of that stuff conceptually if as we're going through there are things that pop in your mind that you're concerned about or want to see addressed. But
so we're talking a $15,000, $20,000 would be an expected in that sort of range.
I think that's reasonable.
Okay.
Yeah, and it could be less if things go are simple and smooth.
Okay.
As we always hope they are, but who knows what it is. Yeah.
Okay, terrific. Well, this is the kind of stuff that really helps us have a solid basis for making decisions about rates. And rates, to people who don't watch the process, can look really arbitrary, but to the people who do, this kind of material is something that we can look at, we can judge, we can make policy decisions on, and by the time it comes to talk to the members of our community about what's happening with rates, we may disagree on where we wind up, but certainly there's much more to talk about than just you guys are always raising rates. So I really appreciate having good economics underneath this. All right, let's move on to new business.
Thank you.
New business item
Thank you
one.
very much.
Bill, this is the one I was talking about. Review and possible action concerning adoption of resolutions accepting bill of sale and easements for Pilly Ridge water system acquisition.
So this is the final step for us to acquire the Pillar Ridge water system. We need to adopt the resolutions accepting the bill of sale and easements for the Pillar Ridge water system. And I hand it over to Dave to maybe talk a little bit about the background.
Mr. President, members of the board, as the general manager has indicated, as far as procedural steps are concerned, we're at that point. You've approved and the agreement for sale and purchase has been signed and in place for a month or so. To wrap up the process, of course, we need the easements and ownership of the fixtures that were on the property, the pipes and pumps and so forth. I think we've got 3 or 4 wells and treatment plant, backflow prevention device, pressure tank, and so forth, which the bulk of the assets, the underground assets, go up to the distribution lines, which will remain in the ownership of the manufactured home park. In order to complete the transaction, the law requires that you evidence your acceptance of the assets, and that's what these resolutions are for. The bill of sale is not a real property, so we're not going to record that. There's no need to record that. But the easements, of course, we do want to record, and it's a legal requirement that a resolution accompany the executed easement deed. That has yet to be done. I have prepared a signature document for the bill of sale. Easement's a little bit more complex, but I'll attend to that. I'm going to be gone for a few days, but I'll attend to that when I get back and send it down to the attorney for the Omaha Park, requesting that it be executed and notarized. Then they send it back to me, and with a resolution we can record it. Director Huber raised a very good question that had to do with the insurance. Really, somewhat surprisingly, the title companies that I dealt with, I think part of it had to do with it was a very busy part of it was the end of the month, very busy part of the time for the title companies, but they really didn't want to accept our business. I had to convince them that we'll pay our fee and we'll do business, as we ordinarily do. I think part of the problem is that the people I talked to were not really accustomed to dealing with public agencies. But what really caused them some consternation was the agreement itself, which I provided a copy of to them, only provides for nominal consideration. And for purposes of issuance of insurance, the title companies and the insurance company rely upon the value of the property, the purchase price of the property. So when you've got a nominal value, it doesn't make, they have trouble comprehending, understanding what to do with that. I don't see any legal objection if we go further with this to proposing a value that's unrelated to what the contract says. It's a matter of insurance and what we feel comfortable with for purposes of title insurance. Usually the title companies offer a minimum amount of coverage. The figure doesn't come to mind right now, but it's generally covered by the amount you pay for the preliminary title report. I did, after some argument, was able to order a preliminary title report, and to me it's a very good one. I sent it out to the email to you. It covers there were no surprises in it, because this transaction's been ongoing for some time, and I've had the advantage of some of the documentation that the Pillar Ridge Mobile Home Park has on their property. All this gets down to the point that, from a legal standpoint, the conservative approach is to press harder and see if we can get some insurance and try to come up with a figure. I can talk to district general manager and the water system engineer. We might think in terms of replacement value of the assets, but it's really the property, and we're getting the property for $1. So the question is, what do we really want to insure it for? That's why my memorandum to you may have seemed a bit equivocal in the sense that, from a legal standpoint, I don't think there's a real significant risk for a couple of reasons. One, it's to the advantage of the purchaser and the encumbrances, the lenders, for us to have the water system. The major encumbrance is the deed of trust issued in the refinancing, and that expressly excludes any right of the lender to take back the property. That was negotiated during the process. And so the deed of trust, if you have a chance to look at the memo, expressly excludes the purchase of the property by this district. So we're covered in that. The major area of exposure we're covered in. Again, it's really kind of a policy decision at this point as to whether you'd like me to pursue further trying to get some insurance. We do have good documentation as to what the condition of the title is, and for the most part, in my view, we're getting clear title. I do recommend that you adopt the resolutions, because that really has nothing directly to do with the insurance issue. We do want to get title of the property and record the easement deed. But if we want to push hard for insurance, we would hold off recording that deed, and I would present it to the title company for recordation in conjunction with the issuance of insurance, if they'll do that. if they continue to refuse, I can either come back to you and tell you what the situation is, or you can authorize us to act accordingly.
So that, in essence, what we're worried about is that somebody can lay a legal claim against the wells or the tank and stuff
Right.
like that.
Right.
Okay, that in terms of perceived risk to the district, that the most logical person to go after those assets would be under a foreclosure, and we already have a perfected position on that, right?
That's correct.
So, and that's very clear that
Yes.
they have no legal.
We're senior to the,
So
Yeah.
then, who else could really go after that? Those assets.
and you couldn't get insurance about an unrecorded interest, so in answer to your question, I don't really, based on the information we have, see any claimant out there.
So that we're trying to get insurance on something that has almost no risk to us.
Well, I'd feel better if we had a little bit of insurance, just because, you know.
Yeah.
But
What are you insuring?
title insurance.
No, but I mean, if they're, I don't understand what we're insuring.
Oh, the title to the property. In other words, if anybody claimed that we didn't own those easements, we would turn to the insurance company to defend us against that claim.
So we're really only talking about the easements. We're not talking, because that's the only real property. The other stuff is not real property. So
That's right.
that the only vulnerability we have is somebody says you can't,
Right.
you don't have the right to get to your wells.
Not that I see.
So
Yeah,
what are
the
we,
reason-
but that's what the issue is.
Right, yeah.
so what are we insuring again? Sort of unclear.
We're ensuring that nobody says we don't have the right to get access to the wells that we own.
When you buy a house, you get a title insurance.
Well, I understand that, but then that kind of protects you against
It's about
unknown
the-
history and
Yeah.
fraud and all sorts of stuff.
Well, yeah.
The same thing here. It just would be a slightly more abstract
Yeah.
notion.
Slightly.
Access to is, it's not completely abstract.
I think one of the reasons that there's hesitancy on the title company is that they view this as a rather unique transaction, and it is unique,
Yeah.
quite frankly. I mean, it's not unusual. We bought title, we bought Cal M's water system before.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
And we
wrote a
got-
slightly bigger check.
Yeah, right. And,
But they had slightly better, something better to
Right.
assess the title.
Well, interestingly enough, most of what we bought was underground,
Yeah.
under somebody else's, under easements.
It's-
In many ways, it was very similar.
it's not as if it hasn't happened. What hasn't happened is there are very few water companies that have been bought for $1.
Yeah.
Although, I will point out that the initial discussion, they asked for a few million and we offered $1.
Yeah.
Now, a few years have gone past and we've had, this is actually a unique transaction in that it's not just about the dollar and it's not just about the water. There's a lot more going on,
Yeah.
and this has really worked out to be a win-win for them and for the
There are
people.
intangible factors that are significant.
Yeah. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the
right.
title
I want
insurance
to get to
company. They're trying to be able to figure out how they can assess their risk so they can assign a premium to it, right?
So,
Yeah.
so I understand that you're going to go see if we can't get something hammered out on that so that we have insurance to protect against.
On the direction of the board, I can try.
Yeah, I think if there was any chance that someone might bring action, whether justified or baseless, I would like to know that we have enough money to
There's a
run our
psychological,
defense.
yeah, there's a psychological advantage to have the insurance. I think that's kind of what you're touching on.
Well, and it's not like we haven't had baseless claims made against the district before,
Exactly.
right? And I would have loved to have had some insurance to fund that defense.
Right, that's
Which
why,
I say baseless because it was disposed of with prejudice. It had no basis.
yeah, as your attorney, naturally I'm going to be conservative and recommend it. If we can get it, I'd recommend to get it. But I just ran into this unusual circumstance.
I guess I'd love to see the language on how you insure something for $1. but
Yeah.
I'll weigh the
No.
language of
We want to
insurance.
get it for more than $1.
Yeah.
And so how do you, I mean, my question would be, okay, so they give you this value, and then someone sues, insurance says, well, I don't believe
Well,
that's the value. How do you
the-
get around that?
Yeah, the replacement value, which doesn't speak to the easements as much as it does to the hardware, is pretty high.
But how do you assess that ahead of
And
time?
I don't think we want to use that, because the premium would probably be pretty significant. And the question is, would it really be worth it? A nominal value might be around 10,000, 20,000, something like that.
So, I mean, so the actual land loss is of really no significance. And the real issue is the underground infrastructure, of which you're saying we may not want to insure it anyway. So I guess to your point, I don't mind looking at it, but it looks a little convoluted to me. So-
I think what I want to insure against is the cost of defending. And there we'd be asking an insurance company to
Yeah.
measure the risk and charge accordingly. And as we've already seen, you've had a long time to look at this. If there's a risk, we haven't seen it yet, but that doesn't mean it's not there. And there could be a baseless thing. So an insurance company can, weigh that risk.
Well, you make a point about baseless claims, which we encountered, but also, if you think of all the things that could go wrong, and I'm not suggesting this would happen, but could happen, but, if the mobile home park, Coach of San Diego, went into bankruptcy, then their question is, who all is going to be out there claiming? There'd be creditors out there, and they would look for every pocket they could find some money in. So, as a matter of speculation, it's possible there might be a baseless claim out there that would call for defense.
Okay, so does general liability insurance protect us in this case at all?
We've got that, and they've got that. General liability is in place.
Okay.
Yeah.
So does that, because well, the way you're describing the title insurance, it seems like it's taking on the characteristics of a liability policy. In that you're
Yeah, but
trying-
it's very narrow. It's to who owns the real property.
right.
And the liability is very narrow,
Yeah.
correspondingly narrow.
Well, you're going to go try to see if you can line something up. If it's something really bizarre, bring it back to us so we can think about it.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point. I'm willing to try to press the issue further with the title company and see if they would be a little bit more accommodating. You never know. I may have caught them at a bad time. I know I caught them at a bad time because they told me so. But aside from that, we'll try to give them in the middle of the month or the beginning of the month instead of the end of the month when they're closing deals.
And there is no real time sensitivity to this.
Not really. A little bit. I think, to be very frank, Coach really wants to close this transaction very badly. We've made the transaction effective retroactively or operative retroactively to July 1.
Right.
From our management standpoint, I believe we're thinking in terms of September 1 for purposes of the revenue stream.
And operation.
And I don't think there's any reason that can't go forward.
So this is a somewhat secondary, this is not integrally tied to that. We can treat this as a separate issue to a certain extent, right? So we
I
have
think
more time on
they would like to go onto that basis.
that.
It's a matter of informal agreement is what it comes down to.
Okay.
So before us is the request to approve the two resolutions.
Yes, and I strongly recommend you do that because that will facilitate the closure no matter what happens with respect to the insurance issue.
So I'm looking for a motion it's a resolution, so we're going to take them separately.
All right, move the first, whatever resolution you have before you, the first one.
So this would be the resolution, could I get a second for the resolution approving and authorizing acceptance of bill of sale for water system assets?
Go ahead.
I'll second.
Okay. And Bill, it's a resolution, so roll call. All right, if we could have a roll call, please.
Director Hardy?
Aye.
Director Boyd?
Aye.
Director Wilson?
Aye.
Director Huber?
Aye.
All right, thank you. The motion carries 4-0. Can we have a motion for the second resolution?
I'll go ahead and make that motion.
Thank you.
Second.
All right.
Just tell me what it is.
This is the, yeah, I was going to read it. This is the resolution accepting grant easements for APNs 047-300-040, -060, and -130.
And that means that like all the surveys are in, and so it's all
Yes,
clear.
yes, we have really impressive, the survey work was a monumental task, and I don't know what the cost was, but my reaction was quite impressive, the work that was done, and that's all part of the easement deed itself. Exhibits A through J, I think, there's quite a few exhibits to the easement deed.
Okay.
All right. Can we have a roll call, please?
Director Hardy?
Here.
Roll call vote.
Director Boyd?
Cover it.
I'm not going to let you vote here. Yeah, this is going to be an up or down here. I vote aye.
I am voting here.
Give him a cookie and
Director Wilson?
Here. Oh, here.
Director Huber?
Aye.
Okay, that is a 4-0. And now I'd like to make a comment.
This became so abstract. Very confusing.
Well, so for $1, we will be soon in operation of the water system at the Pill Ridge community. And I believe strongly that this is going to be a benefit to the members of the entire community, and especially to the members of the community at Pillar Ridge, but not at a cost to the other members of the community. But I believe this is a true win-win, where we get operational flexibility in the system that, among other things, has helped make it possible to not need to go spend over $1 million on a water treatment facility. This is something that if you talk to any of our staff, especially our general manager Clemens, you ask them, do you want to be able to include this in what we consider the totality of the system? The answer I've gotten repeatedly has been, why, yes, because it allows us to be much more flexible in how we operate the system. So this is a really good thing that we've been working towards for a very long time. I'm so pleased that the folks who own and operate the Pillar Ridge community spent so much time and energy with us to really think this thing through. They asked a lot of really good questions to make sure that they weren't going to be doing anything to leave their community residents in any kind of a bind. We asked a lot of really good questions about, does this come out net positive or net negative for the district? And they were able to answer the question about the welfare of the residents of their community in the affirmative, and we were able to answer the questions about, does this make us a stronger, better water system for our entire community? The answer is yes. So really looking forward to this, and I'd like especially to thank Clemens and Dave. Tanya has done a ton of work for us on the engineering. Catherine has been part of this all throughout. And I'm not sure, but I think we're close on 10 years in this whole process.
And Lisa Ketchum.
Oh, absolutely.
Her hard work in representing the people in that.
And of course, the folks that, I'm forgetting the name, is this Coach?
Coach of San Diego.
Coach of San Diego, the owners of the nonprofit that operates the community there at Pillar Ridge. This was not easy, but it sure came to a good conclusion. So I hope they're watching, and I want to tell them thank you. And with that, let's move on to the next item. Item 2, new business, review and possible action concerning formation of SAM Joint Powers Agreement Ad Hoc Committee.
So the Sewer Authority Mid-Coast side plans to have an item on the next agenda, on their next agenda, to essentially identify issues that could be addressed in a revision of the SAM Joint Powers Agreement. And it's either planned to establish a committee, or it looks like a committee actually already has been established consisting of Leonard Warren for GSD, Alan Alifano for City of Half Dome Bay, and Director Boyd is representing Montara Water and Sanitary District. And this group will then later meet and discuss the issues and seek to identify jointly supported goals. So we were asked to bring this item to the board so that the board now can jointly think about what would be questions that we would have about the SAM JPA, what would be sections that we would like to see revised. And we've attached the existing document so that I think the board can inform itself about the SAM JPA, and I believe this is an item that we're probably going to see come up more than once. Probably going to receive status update and continue the conversation.
So, in particular, I asked that this be here so we could have this discussion and go into the next SAM meeting and then the ad hoc committee meetings with input from this board ahead of time. Certainly, Half Moon Bay has been asking for something like this for some time. It's easier to go ahead and do this now for a couple of reasons. One is that we're working very well with the city at this point, and that hasn't always been the case, but we're happy to be at that point. The other is that they're actually starting to talk about why they want to do this instead of just. In the past, it was mostly pounding a shoe on the table and demanding that we have the meeting, but never actually telling us why. So at this last meeting, we got some feedback on it, and I'm looking forward to the opportunity to explore more concretely what they would like to see. There's little question that this is an organically grown contract. There has been some gardening in this organic garden over time, but there's been more interesting plants planted than weeded. So there's clearly some opportunity to take some areas where there's a little bit of language that seems contradictory. Much of the legislative history that goes into how this contract was formed is still more in minds than on paper. And a bunch of things have changed. I believe that having done a lot of research on this, and Leonard Warren has likewise done a tremendous amount of research on this, that as there's been turnover in directors at SAM, that some of that history has not been conveyed, and what we find is every few years when there is turnover, we spend some time educating, but there's likewise turnover in city staff. And so much of that history of how we got here washes away and has to be reinstilled, and it's not always the people who can tell it are also business partners who I think there's been some suspicion that we might be telling it the way we want to shade it because we have a business interest. But the simple one, from my point of view, is that when three agencies were merged in a forced shotgun wedding by the county, we had a perfectly well-functioning sewer treatment facility right here at this facility that served Montara and Moss Beach quite well. The level of treatment was not the best in the world, but it was adequate to the task and certainly met with the requirements of the Regional Water Board's NPDES permit. Granada likewise had a facility. It needed some work, but it was getting the job done. And then Half Moon Bay had a facility. And in the course of merging the three agencies into this JPA, a decision had to be made about which of these facilities, or an altogether new facility, where would we send it all for treatment? So we wound up, now we know historically the decision was made, do the treatment in Half Moon Bay, which means that the smallest of the communities, Montara and Moss Beach, had to send raw sewage 7 miles to the south, involving a whole lot of pumping expense and pipeline construction and maintenance that we had never needed before. That decision about where to put the plant 30 some odd years later, nearly 40 years later, if you just walk in new, you might say, if I'm living in Half Moon Bay, I don't know why I'm paying for Montara's pipe. Well, it's not Montara's pipe. It's the SAM pipe. It's the SAM collection system, and the SAM collection system benefits SAM by bringing everything to a centralized location where it can be treated. There's a unifying principle here that the IPS itself is supposed to represent. And I'm constantly bringing it up. Had the historical decision been to send it all north to our facility, would it be right for us to say, we don't need that pipe? I mean, it all flows right here and we're done, right? So, I mean, we don't need to pay for a 7-mile, multi-million-dollar pipe and all those pumps and PG&E for all that, plus all the cleaning and repairs and air vac valves, and if there's overflows to the south, we shouldn't have to care. It wouldn't make any sense. And likewise, it doesn't make any sense to make that case for any one agency that has the treatment facility there. But it's easy to understand how that can come to be. That people might have that impression if you don't look at the historical totality of it.
Scott, why was the decision made to put it in Half Moon Bay?
Lou, do you have any insight into that?
Well, I think it was because Half Moon Bay had a 1 million-gallon plant that wasn't functioning properly. And so they had the...
Because it was underutilized, right?
Well, no, it was not functioning properly. And Granada only had a 500,000 gallon treatment facility, which wasn't functioning at all. They needed someplace to pump their stuff too. And they tried to pump it to us, and that was the first suggestion. And then I think they ended up with some kind of mutual agreement with Half Moon Bay to pump it there. And that's what basically forced the formation of SAM, is that they had to get those two, and the environmentalists didn't want to have a third. You know, it's 3, consolidate all the outfalls into one was the goal.
Well, and we had where I say the county played a hand in wielding the shotgun on this was the Fitzgerald Marine Reserve was established right around that time, and the boundaries of the reserve were drawn in a way to include our outfall. Well, you can't have a sewer outfall in a marine reserve, now can you? Even though it's just lines on paper, you know, when you're starting.
Actually, the line was drawn excluding our outfall, and then all this stuff came up. Then the county, real quick, moved the Fitzgerald line further north, so it took in our outfall.
And then this agency had discussion about, fine, we'll move it up to near the chart house plant, or the chart house pump station, outside of that boundary, and they moved the boundary again, right? That's how I
only once.
They only moved it once?
And the problem...
Well, because we could have moved it up there.
Well, the problem was that we would have to extend our outfall, which was too...
In any case, we wound up where we are, and we've got the intertie pipeline system, the IPS, as that is the collection system for SAM. It's owned by SAM. It needs to be maintained by SAM. Recent history, Montara and Granada have had the opportunity to make improvements for dealing with wet weather. Half Moon Bay couldn't be persuaded to come along, so we just got very creative and found a way to get a whole lot done for very little money, and we just did it together, the two of us. But we, in the past, well, a couple of years really, Half Moon Bay has been participating more and more in the maintenance of the IPS. I think that makes now a better time than 2 years ago to look at JPA, where they're starting to see the value of that shared facility. and treating it as jointly owned and something that they have as much interest in as we do. Because the one thing we've reminded them about all along the way is if a spill happens on the IPS or because of the IPS, we're all on the hook. And they're on the hook for something like 50% of it. So, you know, it's you can hold back your money, but the fines may be in the millions, and you may not wind up saving a penny if the spills come. And frankly, the spills would be a bad outcome for everybody. So I think they're starting to see the self-interest in
But the salient point is this is not owned by Half Moon Bay, it's owned by the joint, by SAM. So therefore, when the initial agreement was made, it was predicated on that set of facts,
Well,
right?
it's owned by SAM, but SAM is owned by the three member agencies. So half ownership roughly is SAM, is Half Moon Bay.
Right.
And as half owners, they are half responsible for, or they're responsible for half of any of the fines that come about as a result of what SAM may or may not do.
Right.
Even more concerning for them, I hope, is that if something happens because of some preventative maintenance that they prevented from happening, you could imagine that they might be looking at 100% responsibility. If anybody were to stop the agency from doing what it knew needed to be done, I think all eyes would be on that party to say, you know, we tried to get it done and you said no, so you bear that responsibility. And I think we all need to feel that, you know, we've got skin in the game. We've got to work as a team. And again, I think that's why this year makes a better time to do it than any time in recent memory. I think they're imagining some grander things than maybe we are, but we'll have that conversation. And I think it'll be really good because we'll be able to finally explore and get on the table the concerns that everyone has. And like I'm hoping, like we did with Pillar Ridge, you put everything on the table and you sort out what works best together.
Yeah. So on this, sort of as a timeline, you know, we got the packet 2 days ago, and for us to have any real meaningful input, would be hard for us to give meaningful input tonight because I didn't go through in minute detail read that.
It takes a while to absorb the JPA, and it's going to take more than one reading to really feel comfortable with it. It is a bit, I'll use a technical term, jumbledy. But I think you'll find, in general, once you make it all the way through, it actually says a lot more than most people want to let on than it says.
Right.
And it's easy to point to how confusing it is to say, well, I don't think we have to pay for that. I think you'll find that it actually says quite a bit about who pays for what. Where it gets a little confusing is about talking about the project, the current project, and so forth. You just have to look at it as historically. Well, we're well beyond when it was written.
Yeah.
And so take it in the context of what you know it to be now.
But my only point is that for me to give input, and I'm guessing, you know, for Jim and for Dwight and for Catherine, and to you,
I don't think there's any.
We need to have some time to be able to
and
study
I
this.
think you have time.
Yeah.
I don't see us trying to. This is not. I don't want this to be a constitutional convention for SAM.
Yeah.
We are committed and have no real alternative to SAM. So we have to keep the agency together. We have to keep working together. So if we can't get all three parties to agree, you know, nothing's going to change.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to go through this, I think, rather methodically.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't sweat that. And in fact, because of your concern, I'll make sure to express the same concern. Our members, or you know, our directors want some time to ponder this and maybe discuss it again at our next meeting. I think everyone will respect that.
And the ad hoc committee has not met yet, correct?
No, and the ad hoc committee itself won't be able to do anything. It'll just be bringing back recommendations to the full board. So, and Sam only meets once a month typically. So,
Yeah.
I appreciate the concern.
So that discuss and direct the SAM representative. You're the SAM representative.
You know, us too.
Okay, so that how do we say that it now becomes all the director's responsibility to read this so we can get a decent input at maybe the next meeting or something like
Well,
that.
you know what, I would take a different view of it. I think
Okay.
what I'm more concerned about is not the document per se, because I think it is actually, in its jumbled sense, actually fairly clear. I think the real question mark is, what do we want?
Right.
And I would be more interested in discussions, what do we want? So I think as you get closer, I would love to have some more discussion about what's being offered and what we want. And equally important, what does everyone else want? And bring that core,
Right.
and then you can go back and juggle the words of your document.
Exactly. Until we get all the interests on the table. It's interesting, people will come in negotiations and start telling you what they want, but the more interesting question is always, well, what are you actually looking to accomplish?
Exactly.
Because you put a bunch of minds together, especially a bunch of people who've had such a variety of life experiences. Like Bill, I had no idea before tonight that you knew about what it meant, so comfortably to talk about perfecting a title.
Oh.
Not everyone has that experience,
Yeah.
and it's that kind of thing where it's like, look, everybody, tell us what you want to accomplish. We've been talking, and we'll get to it in a little bit, about the recycled water, but it's been really good as we've been meeting on that subject to be able to put some things out there in the context of recycled water that could help give SAM and its members more operational flexibility and more protection against risk of some of the really large monetary risk items that we have for the plant. And it's only coming from one direction, but I mean, it's for all of us to consider and work with that.
Yeah.
That when a farmer says, I need recycled water, or when a golf course says, I need recycled water, they're not thinking about the outfall. But I'll explain that in more detail. But we put it all on the table, and I think we're going to find a package that actually gets a lot done. So I'm looking forward to this, because Half Moon Bay has been reluctant to put things on the table. Now they're willing. I'm looking forward to it a lot.
Good.
So I think that was just for information. Yes. So let's go on to, well, let me just say just for Brown Act purposes, let's not send comments to me and Jim outside of the meetings. I think we can convey thoughts during the meetings. If we get in any kind of time crunch, we can send things through our general manager or something, but for the time being, I think we have plenty of time, and we can bring this back and discuss this at our next meeting.
Well, what I would like, if something is coming up theme-wise, you can always send it to Clemens, and he can report it out to the group.
Right.
So I would appreciate if there's themes coming out prior to any discussion, that we get some heads up.
Oh, that'd be good.
That would give us some preparation time.
Yep. Okay. All right. Next item. Item 3, review and possible action concerning summary of public planning workshop.
So on June 24th, we held a public planning workshop to receive input from our customers for the strategic planning process that we're currently implementing. And I think we want to go through a short summary, simply to inform the full board what happened. I think essentially the attendance of the public workshop was very good. I estimate conservatively that there was around 70 customers that attended the workshop. Might have been more. We provided a brief introduction to the district that was done by the facilitator Martin Rauch. And that was followed by a discussion about several suggested topics, and later an open forum for comments. Some of these suggested topics, or that we asked for some feedback, were essentially services. What do you like or dislike about each of the following services: water, wastewater, garbage. We asked about communication and customer service. Do you feel you know enough about the district? We asked about finance. Do you feel the following bills are reasonable and affordable: water, wastewater, garbage? challenges facing us in the future. Let's think about our community as far in the future as we can. What are the most important challenges facing the community and the district that the district should prepare for? Local governance and cooperation with agencies, cooperation, consolidation, competition between other agencies, changes or additions to services. Those were essentially some questions, some general topics that were suggested and well taken. I was a bit surprised about how essentially this turned out. I think it turned out much more into a question and answering game than I originally thought it would. But at the end, I think it was actually very productive. I think the information was received. It was the questions were very good in general. Was great interest in what the district is doing. And I think the information was received very well. At the end, there were actually 14 topics that were suggested by the public, and one could vote on their importance. Again, we have a full summary attached. The 5 topics that received the most votes were development of community parks district, development of local internet service, infrastructure development, and water quantity. I think I encouraged the board, and hopefully had a chance to work a little bit through the summary, as well as we have some further comments that were submitted in writing that are also summarized and attached. And of course, the workshop was also on Pacifica TV, and encourage everyone to take a look at how it actually went. I know you attended, Scott, and Catherine was there as well. So I think in general it was very well received by the community that we asked them for directions.
I would say, I mean, as a politician, there are clearly at least 500 people there. No, I counted something like 70, but people had already been coming and going some. So I would guess that we're in total attendance probably up somewhere around 100. But it was really well attended, and like Clement said, it was a lot of engagement, some really good discussions. I really enjoyed watching the process. At the end, Martin had written up a whole bunch of ideas and areas on boards, and everybody had 3 stickers, and everybody got to go put their 3 stickers on the things that they felt most strongly about. And that was a really fun process to watch, because there were things that people wanted to talk about, and then you watch those people go put their stickers on things that they thought were more important. And it was a really good exercise.
I want to make the comment that Martin Rausch did a great job, but you Clemens and Judy, I guess you guys wrote this up, and this is a great presentation. I really appreciate this presentation. This is really a lot of information here, and I appreciate all this written down. Thank you very much.
In looking at these, a lot of these are sort of, I think, sort of easy to understand, but there's one that seemed to get a lot of attention that I'd like to just discuss for just a second, and that's develop our own internet service. The impression that I got is that there's a strong desire on the part of the people, especially that live in Montara, well, Moss Beach, that we have better cell phone service within that area. And that is there a way that we can facilitate that desire within the framework of what we are as a water district?
It's really interesting you mentioned that, because over time we've had interactions with the cell companies for that many interactions have worked out to where we now host and receive rent for cell tower or for cellular antennas on district property. Clemens and I and Catherine have been working over many years to get to where we are with that, and we were this close to having one of the carriers put panel antennas on the new water tanks. And
The schoolhouse tanks?
yeah, I mean, and we had agreement. We were very close on getting them to, as part of that, do a lot of the financing, fronting several years' rent all into a lump sum up front to help us finance the construction of the tanks. And we didn't get it done because they vanished, which is not unusual for the companies that do the negotiating for the cell sites. The cell companies trade them in and out like playing cards or something. But we got really close, and that's the kind of thing that we can use to help structure future deals. And we've got several interesting properties. Up on Alta Vista is another one where we've got some interesting accessibility there, but also very, very interesting is at our pump station by La Costanera. That has line of sight down Highway 1 to the north.
Yeah.
And there are a number of places where we've got interesting property holdings that could be used. And we're keeping an eye to this. And now this won't solve all the problems, but one of the things that we did talk specifically to one of these folks about was using the Alta Vista site to shoot antennas down to point them into the areas in the tree streets where there's not good signal.
Right.
It's not something we can make happen on our own without a pretty big capital investment, and it's not really in our wheelhouse, but we have the opportunity in partnership. We just have to be patient. Let me jump ahead on an issue that does come up. A lot of municipalities run fiber to the homes and use the sewer system to do it. Our sewer system is not of the size that would make that as attractive as it would be in larger cities where sewer pipes can be big and you can attach fiber optic cable, a shielded fiber optic cable to the top of the pipe on the inside. You've got basically this gigantic conduit that lets you go everywhere, and you can get very close to the homes.
Gosh, that's an interesting concept.
It is. It gets really personal if you think about it, but don't think too hard. But our sewer lines are far too small to be doing that, and the first time you take a cutting blade through to cut out roots, you know, so much for your infrastructure. I have talked with Rob at CosideNet, who worked on the wireless stuff, Pacifica Net, about what it would take to do here. The economics don't look particularly fabulous. Pacifica's much easier. If you look at the areas where they've put up the wireless, they have many more large, flat spaces.
Yeah.
So you don't have to put in quite as many radios. Here, like in Montara, to do it, we'd have to put a radio every block or two. It could be difficult. It's not impossible, but it's something I've been thinking about for a very long time.
To me, the salient point is the fact that now there's it's not conjecture. There's a demonstrated desire that this is important, and so that in prioritizing to put a little more effort into somehow making this work.
We might be able to. We should talk. Let's go have coffee about this and talk a little bit and get out a map and start drawing circles.
Just how we could fit within our purview how we can facilitate this.
Well, there are certain things that Clemens and I have talked about before, because we have the radio read meters, but we have to have a truck drive the district to read them all. We bought basically the cheapest kind. It was smart. It served our purpose quite well. But it would be kind of nice to have those meters reporting in all the time. We'd have better information, more timely to deal with leaks. We could find them faster. Plus, we wouldn't have to have somebody drive the district to do it. And we could see when a meter starts really acting up, we could get out there sooner, maybe. But to do that, we would need to have radio infrastructure throughout the community. So there's some opportunity there, possibly, to build a mesh network that would allow us to, get two birds with one stone. Now, I don't know how much you know about operating one of these utilities for the.
No, because to me it seems like the extent of our involvement should be sort of limited to if we can get cell phone companies to put a cell phone tower either in Alta Vista or Schoolhouse.
We let them do the job.
And let them do it. But that in the process, without any real expense to us and potential some revenue, that we can do a nice community service.
Well, I'd love to sit down with you over coffee and take out a map of the community and see if we can find something that might seem practical. We could bring it back.
Did the schoolhouse tank face into Moss Beach?
It does have a good line of sight.
It has line of sight up into the community above it to some degree, but better it hits around that bend where the signal drops off, and it's very attractive for that.
Yeah.
The drop calls between the two communities happens all the time. I was talking to Clemens the other morning about this agenda, and he's like, "You're breaking up." And I'm like, "Yeah, it's because I'm driving right past the office, going right around that turn."
Everybody knows the
It's pretty funny. The closest I physically was in that conversation to Clemens, and I was breaking up.
It was actually kind of funny because, was it today or yesterday, there was two engineers from Sprint walking in and asked to do some testing, essentially. And of course I offered the Alta Vista side, the schoolhouse side as usual, and then have some interest. And they will be out here in the coming weeks and do some testing. And hopefully, we get them to
Do you want to mention too on the Kanoff pump station too?
I will mention the Kanoff pump station. I mentioned the two other sites.
We have to go to Sprint, huh? We have to convert to Sprint.
I tell you,
these guys come and go, like Scott said. I mean, they're sometimes here like butterflies and are very active, and then they just disappear.
It would be really frustrating, except for the fact that we've got a garage filled with cell company equipment and a bunch of antennas up on the poles. It does sometimes work out, so we just have to keep at it.
Right.
Okay.
It's like looking for the perfect wave.
But the majority of this is really going to come up tomorrow, right?
Come up
Tomorrow.
Yes, we definitely wanted you guys to take a look at this tonight so that we don't have to spend a lot of time on this tomorrow. There's a summarization, fairly good summarization, so we'll include this, absolutely.
So
we wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about this and start digesting this tonight.
Let's mention now, while we're on the topic, no one at home is going to see this until after the fact, but just so you'll know, after the fact, tomorrow we're having a board workshop, and this material will be a big part of what we're discussing as we discuss the future direction of the board, of the agency. All right, well, let's move on to new business item 4.
Thank you.
Review and possible action concerning staff's report from Sand Recycled Water Committee. So I can introduce this one.
Go ahead.
I'm on the Sand Recycled Water Committee. We have had, I believe now, 3 meetings of the committee. The first was just the SAM folks, which included our general manager, Rob Hopkins, Half Moon Bay City Council member Alan Alfano, and Granada Sanitary Director Rick Lohman, and myself. that was the first meeting. The second meeting, we had Dave Dixon, the general manager of Coastside County Water District, and Ken Coverdell, one of their directors. We had a very good discussion that led to our meeting last week with Ken, and this time Dave Dixon couldn't come, but we had Bruce Russell, who is the CEO and I believe managing partner of Ocean Colony Partners, which is the organization that operates the 2 golf courses down in Half Moon Bay. And we wanted a chance to speak with Bruce. We've spoken with him a lot in the past. We've worked with him on the pilot project that we did in 2008. And of all of the people that we dealt with that last time, I would say nurserymen's did quite a lot of work. Bruce did an extraordinary amount of work. And so he came very seriously prepared for this discussion. And it's very clear that the golf courses and their ownership, which are the golf courses are owned by the Plumbers and Steamfitters Union local retirement funds. So this is a rather substantial set of assets that the OCP works very hard to manage well. He said that they are that the economy took a pretty serious downturn, but they are in really good shape this year, looking to have an extraordinary year. That the value of the investment is such that maintaining its viability long term is very important to the people he works for, and they need water. Now they've done some things which I find remarkable, and one of the reasons I really love working with Bruce is that when we first started talking back in, might have been 06 or 07, they were in the process of I'm not a duffer, so I'm not sure of the term, but I think moving to a links style golf course, which is the Scottish style. So there's a lot more rough, and the tended areas of the course are much smaller. And if you think about, from our perspective as a water utility, smaller greens, narrower fairways and such means less mowing, less fertilizer, and less water. And the Scottish experience, which they have been having a lot of success selling as, the only way to golf. And they have established a reputation as the best golf course north of Pebble Beach, anywhere in California. And he spoke very confidently about this, so I take him at his word. But I love that what they've done to enhance the experience of playing at their courses also happens to be extremely smart. Saves a lot of money, saves a lot of time, and saves tons of water. Mm-hmm. They have, in the years since we last worked together, reduced their water needs by several tens of millions of gallons a year. And so now their need from an organization like SAM has been reduced to something which SAM actually has a pretty good chance of being able to provide. Last time it was a really hard proposition because they actually needed more than we could reliably provide. Interesting thing to know about recycled water and users like a golf course. I mean, you think about it, it's pretty obvious they're not going to need water 24 hours a day. And they're not going to need water every day of the year. Christmas Day, they're really not going to be watering the links. And they're not going to be, they could, but I don't think it's really the Scottish experience to be watering the golfers during the day.
Yeah.
Right? So they need water at certain times of the day and at certain times of the year. And then what they need on any given day is driven as much by weather conditions as anything. And so some days they might need this much, and other days they might need this much. He said they got like 5 days a year where they have peak demand, and all the rest, they don't need anywhere near as much. So I think peak day they need something like 800,000 gallons, nearly a million, but they only need that 5 days a year. And you think, well, so take a bunch of it and store it somewhere. Well, having storage, they have ponds, but they don't have an infinite number of ponds, and their ponds have actually silted up over the years. And they could dredge them, but you made it very clear they haven't dredged them because they don't have anything to put in there. There's no point in spending the money. So they've been waiting and thinking and planning, and they have a pretty good idea that if we're able to get this moving, that they'll be dredging and applying for permits to dredge at the same time that they apply for permits for things like using the recycled water. And the project that I think, pardon me, Dwight, I just absolutely drew a blank.
Personalize that. I'm really in deep depression that you'd acknowledge my attendance, but I'll get over it.
Dwight was there, and I will hold me to the truth on all this.
I'm listening.
So, correct me if I go astray.
Oh boy.
Oh my gosh. Well, I must admit that my
that's all right,
attention.
Scott. The aging process affects us all.
That's right, it does. As I can attest to more and more as the days go by. So the project that we're contemplating, here's the approach that we're contemplating. Do the project that we know we can get done, that has a customer that knows they can buy it and is willing to commit to long-term contracts to do it. And that project would be this. We would put a package plant on the facility just like we did last time, except it would be scaled appropriately. We would run pipe to the fence line. At the fence line, CCWD would pick it up and run pipeline almost directly across Pillarcitos Creek to where Ocean Colony Partners has pumps and wells. And OCP would then take the responsibility for doing that interconnect, putting in the shutoff valves and so forth, backflow prevention and all the necessary gear there. There had been talk about a number of different ways to get the thing done, but we know it's almost entirely feasible that we could build, call it a trellis over the creek and take a double-sleeved pipeline over the creek. It's a very simple project when you look at it that way, and it's something that Bruce and I both came up with estimates of how long we thought it would take to get through permitting, and we think we both independently came up with 18 months. So I think that given our experience, like with the project that we did in Granada with the underground tanks, if you design a project to be so clearly beneficial and so clearly minimal impacting, we might be able to do this with the Coastal Commission and the Regional Board and Fish and Game and U.S. Fish and Wildlife and the Army Corps all cheering us on and saying, get on with it. Certainly the state is very interested in moving these things forward. So by not getting too big an appetite, we can get something done. CCWD is very excited. They think they can go borrow the money to front the cost of all of this. They're in agreement that at least we haven't tested it with their full board, but Ken is representing that they would be willing to put the money up and let Sam design and build the facility on the SAM site without trying to control what it was. Last time that was a big sticking point. They wanted one technology and we thought a different one was more modern and smarter because it would be easier to keep up to date over time because you have components you can swap out. So the SAM reps, CCWD, Bruce, all seemed like we may actually be finding something we can do together on this pretty quickly. Dwight was there to represent our agency's interests. So I think I should invite Dwight to chime in at this point.
You sure I was there?
You were there. I know exactly where you were sitting. I just didn't look far enough around the table in my memory. I got to Bruce and got all excited and stopped because I was so glad to be meeting with Bruce.
I was that evening. So So,
Well, remember that Bruce spoke, he spoke extemporaneously for what, an
oh
hour?
God, it went on forever.
He did, but
But,
it's like facts and figures.
And duplication of facts and figures. But anyway, I think as long as this group can keep this project simple.
Yeah.
I was a little nervous about Alan Alifano because he was talking a lot about who's going to control all this stuff. So I think the whole takeaway from this is keep it simple, keep it from the sewer plant to the golf course is phase 1. Don't put phase 2, 3, and 4 into phase 1 and
Right.
just get that phase 1 off the ground. It makes perfect sense. Get it started, get it moving. I like the idea that the Coastside Water District will actually, they can go out and get the loans. That means you don't have to go through bond providers and all the stuff that deals with. And then if grant money comes in, as you well know, I think Alan put out that in this water bond out there is grant money that's available for water recycling. So, perhaps that might mediate it, maybe. My guess is that would be better for a phase 2, phase 3 project.
I think it would. And one of the things that was really clear, one of the things that we're not trying to do with this is build a distribution pipeline.
Yes.
Because it was interesting. Everybody in the room was very well aware that the treatment is actually a lot cheaper than the distribution. So here we're talking about building a stretch of pipe less than 300 feet long. And it's really an interconnect. It's not a distribution pipeline really at all. It's what gives CCWD an opportunity to come in and have a piece of physical infrastructure in the mix, but it's not going to be a very impressive pipe except for the fact that it's going to exist.
Wait, you say 300 feet, it goes from the plant to an existing pipe that CCWD has?
No, it's across the creek to the wells where OCP owns the wells.
Oh, okay.
And one thing you should know, so Bruce made it very clear last time and reiterated very strongly this time, they're not going to give up the wells. No one, and we're a water district, you have a well, you never give it up.
Yeah.
For the same reason, he's not going to give up his backup mechanism.
Yeah.
And but he went on to say that he has also made promises, and he intends to keep them, that he is going to take those wells and he's going to take them out of production and simply hold them in reserve and only produce them every so often to keep them healthy. As we know, you have to flush things and so forth.
And just for my curiosity, where are those wells?
Those wells are almost right on Pillarcitos Creek, just diagonally across from the plant itself.
But they have 2 or 4.
Okay.
I think he said 5.
So it's basically right where the bridge that we'd like to get them to fix, is that right?
No, I'll show you on Google Maps.
Okay.
It's actually Apple Maps, and no, you'll see. It's just a straight shot across the creek.
Okay.
If you ever walk it, I would recommend using some insect repellent because you'll pick up ticks like crazy. But it's a very quick. It's like a 5-minute walk to get to the creek at the point where you could probably jump across on stones.
Yeah.
If at the low part of the year.
But the long and the short is the infrastructure is predominantly in place then.
Yeah.
So Scott, is Sam going to just distribute the water to CCWD, or will it be a charge?
That's the idea. One of the things that we haven't nailed down, but which Bruce was very clear and very direct on, is that he expects his annual outlay to be $515,000, maybe $520,000. So.
No, I thought it was, I remember that right. It had so much to do with 100-foot measure. It was $515. That wasn't the total. It was $515 per hour.
Can I make a point of order?
Yeah.
A point of order. This is supposed to be a report on recycled water. And Scott, I made this request to you before. I think it'd be appropriate the meeting was last week.
Yes.
Okay, it'd be appropriate to inform the SAM chair of these issues.
I've asked Rob to keep you informed of
Yeah,
this.
well, I haven't been informed. And
Okay, well, let's take this up with Rob.
We're discussing SAM business, and the board members are asking questions, and I think that's great. But I think we need to have a situation where the SAM chair is not hearing this for the first time has not been appraised of what's going on. So I request that the point of order that we, if there are no further questions from
Well,
the
we're
other
not-
two board members, we move on.
Well, I would.
Well, no, actually, I disagree strongly with this, Jim. And one, as a SAM board member, you're well aware that the committee is and has been meeting. We
Well,
intend to continue doing this.
I know that you had your first meeting last week.
And the way that committees report to the board is at board meetings.
Okay.
And to do so outside of board meetings could constitute an issue. The fact of the meeting is not an issue, but
Well, just out of respect, Scott, I'm not.
I understand. I understand
not legal
that
issues.
if
but
we
I'm
have
hearing this for the first time.
if we have well,
So-
you're not going to hear the details of this.
Well, I have already heard the details.
Well, you're not going to hear the details of this outside of a convened public meeting, because I'm not going to share them with you as a committee member. I'm not going to share them with any other member of the SAM board who is not on the committee, except at properly, duly noticed public board meetings,
All right.
of which this is one.
Okay.
I have a duty under the law, and I intend to uphold that duty. I'm happy to make sure that you're aware of the committee meetings.
Well, we're just you gave the report, and now we're discussing the.
Well, I'm still giving the report. As it turns out, I've got a page full of notes, and I'm not all the way through.
Okay, all right. I made my point. Just out of respect, maybe the SAM chair could
The
be
SAM
informed
then-
as to what's happening.
Well, the SAM chair is not entitled to more details of what happens in the committee than any other member of the board, and other members of the board are going to get a report at the SAM meeting,
That's fine.
and I have an opportunity here, and so I'm using that opportunity
Scott,
to give you a heads
Scott,
up.
I made my point. I think it's a point of order that I made my request.
Okay, well, let me be
Want to continue?
perfectly
You
clear.
want to continue?
I-
This is a MWSD meeting.
I'm-
I think policy should be discussed at the SAM meeting, and I think that we're not the SAM board is not getting a chance to get the input of this meeting and the discussion in policy direction. So this is not this is a MWSD issue, a shared issue, of course, but I think it should come from the SAM board, and SAM board should be first appraised.
Well, let me
Can I just?
let me take issue with you on this, Jim.
Before you do, Scott.
Well,
let me
hang on. No,
No,
seriously, hang on.
Scott, you don't have to take issue.
Jim,
Go ahead and continue.
as
on.
chair of this board, as president of this board, I am conducting this meeting. And it's fine to have your opinions on how we should go about this, but
Well, thank you.
I understand that you wanted to be kept informed. You are actually being informed before the next SAM meeting. I could, I suppose, for some odd reason, have waited until then, but this agency is a member owner of SAM. This matter is of long-standing interest to this board. We have here at the table a person that I personally insisted on having there as
Scott,
someone.
those are all obvious things. I mean, go ahead. Why don't you go on with your discussion? Go
Excuse
ahead.
me, Jim.
You don't have to.
Jim, excuse me.
You don't have to drill in the issue. Go ahead and continue on with it.
If you're going to dress me
Recycle
down
water.
for how I didn't violate the Brown Act, I'm going to push back and let you know precisely why I did what I did. And I thank you. I'm going to continue this.
You know, we've already been a half hour on this issue. I don't think we need to
Actually,
go into the Brown Act.
I wrote down that time too. Look, Jim.
Okay. Go ahead, Scott. Just paraphrase. We don't have to, get a dressing down on this issue. Go ahead. Continue on with the report. It's fine. I concede. Go ahead.
As an issue of long-standing interest to this agency has worked harder than any other to get recycled water going. I'm very excited, and I'm sure we all are, to see that we're finally actually moving on this thing again. I'm doing what I can to keep both my colleague at SAM informed and this agency and its directors informed, and I intend to go into each of these meetings being as well informed by my colleagues at this board as my colleagues at the SAM board. And that requires sharing the details, and this is the first opportunity I've had to legally share the details with you. And part of what I want to accomplish here, one, I want to make sure that Dwight has the opportunity to convey his thoughts as the designated representative from this agency. I am taking some indulgence here to lay out some things that I think are important to understanding about the nature of the project that we contemplate. I want to get the feedback from all of you about, are we heading down a good path? Does it sound like a good path, or are we barking up the wrong tree? And course correct as early as we can. So the number that I have in my notes is $515,000 per year is what OCP was anticipating. That was on the order of about $140,000 a year, I think, in terms of operational cost. And then the balance of that would have been the cost of the water.
Yeah, I just heard it differently, that's all.
Sure, and I wrote it down here towards the end of my notes because I think I misheard it earlier in the meeting, and I was thinking that he was talking about the HCF cost.
Yeah, that's what my understanding is. We can get
Yeah,
there.
where we didn't hear agreement was from CCWD on the unit costs.
Right.
But Bruce made sure to go ahead and stake his claim to that number.
Is that number to duplicate what their current costs are?
No.
They would probably increase their cost by about 35%, plus or minus.
And they figured that was sort of their
Contribution to society, basically. And
Yeah.
also the thinking was that they probably should get out of the well business anyway.
but that's as far as they would be willing to
Right.
push it.
Right.
Okay.
That was it.
Yeah, you couldn't have been more clear on that point. It also, I think it's in, taking into consideration too what's happening with CCWD rates, especially with the BAUSCA predictions about where all that's going.
So CCWD is basically wheel and water, right? Is that what this really amounts to?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I think the only exception for just the use of the golf course might be as that pipe goes into the Ocean Colony Golf Club golf courses. They happen to go by houses, so there could be potential. There was some small discussion about could they access that water for their lawns as that pipe goes by their houses. And I don't know the geography that well enough. Apparently there's a number of homes that could be a potential. And then there was some minor discussion about who would benefit from that revenue, and that just sort of was an open discussion at that point.
Bruce left it open that it's their pipeline. He made that point
Right.
very deliberately. It took quite a while to make that point, but I understand his point, and it's that he then got to where he was headed with that, which is they're open to talking to other parties about coming in and tapping into the pipeline and getting beneficial use. Like there's some nurseries and there's a farm and there's a few things like that might benefit.
So they run on a pipe that's all the way north of Kelly Avenue, all the way down to Ocean Colony?
Yeah.
And what size pipe is it?
He said it varies in
Yeah.
size, but I think it's somewhere between 8 and 10 inch.
Well,
Do you know what the size is?
No, but 8 or 10 inches.
that's a serious pipe.
I think I wrote it down, but it's
I don't remember
Floods the
that
water.
number, but that's,
Yeah.
they're using about 94 million gallons a year now, and they would like to have a good chunk of that be recycled water.
And then
It's down from 135.
the details of what level the water gets treated at before it goes through there, that's pretty much quantified.
There was, one of the things that we are going to try to get in is the daily samples that we ran through the pilot plant last time. They were concerned that the sodium load was too high last time. We started a project to try to chase down what was causing that. We dropped it because the project ended.
Yeah.
That's something of concern, but he's pretty well convinced that he would get something similar. I think we might be able to get him something better if we can find if somebody's dumping salt water in somewhere, we might be able to make that better. So we should at least look. But he's convinced that they're going to have to flush the greens once a month, the tees in the greens once a month with CCWD water, and the holding ponds that they have are where the CCWD water terminates. So they put it into the ponds and then they pump from there. So if those ponds are full of our water, they'd have to drain that down before they put the CCWD water in to then be able to flush the tees and greens. So there's some interesting operational considerations that they would have to manage, but it's good to know what would be complicated for them so we can keep that in mind as we talk about what we do, because the other thing that's interesting is how often do we, how much do we run our recycled treatment facility? If we only run it to meet their needs, then they can only get it as fast as we can produce it. Right.
Yeah.
So there's a buffering thing going on here in demand and supply. If, on the other hand, we have a way to keep that thing running more constantly and find other places to send that water, it's possible we could get a lot more of it treated really well. And one of the things I would like to see is enough operational margin in the revenue to be able to run and produce recycled water, the higher treated water, more so we could discharge it into some underground pipes that would then leach out to Philosopher's Creek, which would help the creek and the things that live in it.
Right.
But there we have to get the chemistry good enough to make that work. But it's one of those things, that's one of those opportunities that I think Dwight was referring to, an opportunity that we can't let be a gating factor for whether or not we get the good project done. That would make a good project better, but it shouldn't be something to stop the good project.
So if I'm hearing this right, what you're saying, get phase one done, but phase one was done with the knowledge that it would be consistent with phase two and phase three.
Well, no, what I was saying is just make sure phase one gets done so that we have it on the books working.
Yeah.
And then start planning phase two and three, but keep the phase two and three separate. So for instance, if you wanted to go north with a piping system as part of phase two, don't encumber it on phase one.
Right.
Keep them clean.
Keep it in mind, don't foreclose the opportunity. And that's one of the things where I think our friends to the south get a little excited about phase one and weren't thinking at all. And I'm really grateful Dwight is there to be able to say, hey, don't forget Montara.
Yeah.
Not to stop anything, but to say keep us in mind, because Ken and I had a conversation at one point about if you want to run Purple Pipe up to Granada and we want to run Purple Pipe up to Moss Beach, probably easier if we work together on that.
Yeah.
All right. So,
okay.
I mean, this is all exploring the possibilities. We have a lot of work to do to see if we even have something feasible enough to take back. I mean, we will take this back to the same board, but right now it's a bunch of people sitting around the table getting very excited. There's a lot of work to do to try to turn this into a real project.
But that's the good part, is that people are excited about it.
Yeah, and everybody's at the table.
Yeah. Okay.
Reports. Sewer Authority Mid-Coast.
Okay, we had a meeting on July 28th. Sewer Authority Mid-Coast side. A couple things happened. There was a request to ratify the selection of SRT Consultants as lowest responsive bidder to complete the wastewater treatment plant safety and reliability study for not to exceed $30,000. The board already approved that contract. SRT was the only bidder. One of the Half Moon Bay representatives was not there, so the other one asked that we hold off on approving that or not approving it, it had already been approved, but reapproving or recertifying it. And there was a little bit of confusion as to how that should have been handled. So the SAM board will discuss that at the next meeting. And I'm sure that the project will be finished. It's halfway done now. Then the other thing that happened was we received updates on recycled water, and there's no update at that point. We approved a contract with Newt Engineering, consulting engineers, in an amount not to exceed approximately $15,000 for on-call engineering services and support services for the wastewater treatment plant lead to digester. So there's one digester that's working. We want to have two that are working. So one can be turned off and the other one.
And there's two total right now?
Yeah, there are two structures, just one is working.
Okay.
And then have Newt Engineering work on the digester feed thickening assessment. There's a device that takes the waste product from the bacteria and compresses it into cakes, and it's hauled and taken to the dump. And then the final thing that was done was the SAM board approved a contract with SRT Consultants not to exceed $28,500 to complete the various projects in the air vac replacement. The air vac replacement of the force main issues. So prepared bid documents for the air vac valve replacements. Only a couple of them have been completed. The bypass stations. Look at the conditions of the Portola and Princeton pump stations, and the Montara interceptor manhole base pump replacement. So contract with SRT Consultants. Scott, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, on that last one, some of these projects were held up during the period where we had an interim general manager, and I had a pretty strong disagreement with the interim general manager over the holding up of these projects. So I'm really glad that we are finally getting these.
2014 is the year.
After you ignored me for about an hour,
I know if we ignore you too long, that's what's going to happen. That's right.
We get bored over here.
Yeah. I'm just really pleased to get these projects back underway. And last year was very frustrating as some of these things got set on the side, because in particular the air vac valves have to do with managing our risk of leaks and of fines, and it was not a great decision to put them off, and it is a very good decision to get them done, and so I'm really glad to see that.
What'd you guys do with the interim manager anyway? She gone?
We thank her for her services. She is now doing some consulting work for the city of Half Moon Bay.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So no, that was a good report, and I think that covered a lot. It was a pretty full meeting this last one. Rob is our new general manager is eager to get a lot of good things done, so he's pulling it all together. Let's see, Midcoast Community Council. No one here to speak on that. CSDA report. Director Senator Carter is out of town. CCWD, North Coast County Water District Committee report.
Yes, we have a meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock to meet with two board members, and that will take place at their offices in Pacifica. and Jim and I will be attending, and Clemens will be attending. And basically a discussion of areas of common interest, with the emphasis being on emergency interests and things that are a benefit to both districts. Jim, do you have anything to add to that?
Discuss regional solutions
Yeah.
for emergency preparedness. And that meeting is still on?
Yes.
Okay, for the two members of North Coast? Great.
Yes.
Good.
And Clemens, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that summarizes. So an initial meeting that is only with North Coast County Water District at this point. So we're looking forward to meeting with the full group after that.
So why was it just, why aren't both of them together? I thought the idea was to have all three going forward.
This is essentially us going to them, asking of them officially, inviting them officially to the group and seeing.
Just having one preliminary meeting.
I don't care, I'm just curious.
Okay.
All right, attorney's report.
Just for information, I'll be attending the legal committee of California Association of Sanitation Agencies tomorrow.
Sounds like good times. All right, director's reports.
I pass.
Did I report at the last meeting that, I don't think I did, that there was an election in July in Monterey, which included Marina, San City, Monterey, Carmel, and Pebble Beach, and Carmel Valley. And the vote was to vote whether to proceed with a study of buying out Cal-Am. And so the vote was to whether we should look into buying out Cal-Am. And I just, being a homeowner in that area, I'd like to report that Cal-Am spent $4 million advertising against that vote. We watch TV, there'd be commercials every 20 minutes against that vote. The newspaper ads, they spent $4 million. And Cal-Am had all the mayors of the cities and most of the city councils on their side against looking into buying out Cal-Am. And sure enough, the vote was again was not in support of looking into buying out Cal-Am. So it's very interesting.
Just for my curiosity, how did that get on the ballot in the first place?
Well, you know, there's Cal-Am, and then there's a water management district. That so there's Cal-Am and then water management district for the whole area. In the water management district, the board of directors and the president wanted to spend a minimal amount of money to look into buying out Cal-Am and this is an important timing because Cal-Am is applying to build a desalinization plant in San City, which is 4 miles from Monterey, and in the sand. And if the buyout takes place after they finish building the desal plant, then the people in that county will have to pay a premium to buy the desal plant from Cal-Am also. It was a critical point to bring this up.
Yeah.
And again, Cal-Am spent $4 million of the ratepayers and citizens' money to fight against this request to look into it. I think it was a sad thing, and a lot of people are disappointed.
Was the vote close when it finally happened?
It was pretty close, yeah. But the vote to not look into the...
What was pretty close to me?
The vote, I don't have the numbers, but I remember it being close.
Okay.
So I just want to say that we have accomplished that buyout of county. We're the first ones to do that. And that makes me more happy and proud of our accomplishment, because Monterey, Pebble Beach, and Carvel are paying the premium for the water, which is. And I drove across. I went to the Concourse de Elegance. I witnessed a car being auctioned for $38 million, which was a record. And I drove across. It was in Quail Golf Course area, and I drove across the Carmel River, and it was empty. Not a drop in the river. Completely empty.
That's
Dry as a bone.
That's Callahan pumping that.
Yeah. Anyway, that's my report.
They've been under order to cease pumping from the river for years.
Yeah.
Time.
Yeah, well, it's Callahan has support by the PUC, and we've heard about the PUC recently.
All right, General Manager's report. Okay, hearing no objections, we're adjourned.
For tomorrow, if it's a meeting there,
initiative.
we'll do the-
I believe.
Yeah.
They've been